Hi everybody, Dave Vanderweel here. Today I'm going to go through a demo project that I've made for you in Laravel. The goal is to not teach you the whole framework, but to give you enough tools to get you started to build your own, potentially your own first project. So the first couple tools you'll need something like XAMPP. It's okay if you use something else, but I recommend XAMPP. Then you'll need something like Composer, which is a dependency manager for PHP. And then these are the Laravel document. This is the Laravel documentation. You can use it to install Laravel. You can just go through basically these steps right here to create your own project, and then this is to serve it. Okay. And then before we begin, I should say probably the things that you should know before you try and do something like this would be, obviously you should know some PHP because Laravel is a PHP framework. You should also know something about the MVC style of development, right? Model view controller. You don't have to be an expert in it, but you should at least understand the basic logic of that. Okay. So before we begin, this is the application. So we're gonna actually just register a new user. All right, so this is a simple to-do application. You can go to projects, no new projects. You can create a new project. Here we got this here. And then once you have one of these, you can go back and view all of your projects. You can edit the project. You can delete it. You can also view the project's to-dos because a project can have multiple to-dos. All right, you can view the a to-do. It'll automatically generate as incomplete. You can edit that to-do and say it's complete. And you can delete that to-do. All right, so that's the application, and let's get started. So inside of your application, we're in the root directory of our application. You're going to have this env file. You're going to have to fill it out with a couple of things: the name of your application, the connection to your database, right? So what you're going to actually do is go into, if you're using XAMPP, you'll go into phpMyAdmin, create the name of just create a new table and call it, something like to-do demo or whatever you want the table to be called. I'm sorry, not a new table, a new database. And then you put the name of that database in here. And then from using command line tools, you'll create all the tables and all that. Okay. And then you need your database password and username, obviously. So you can save that and close it. And before you begin, you're going to go into app and then providers, app service provider. This is just the busy work at this point, but you have to put in this second line right here. I'm sorry, not that one. The first one right here. Illuminate support facade schema, and you're just going to have to put this right here to make Laravel play nice with the database. Okay, and then that's it, and then we can get into the exciting stuff. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is tackle the M side of MVC, the models. So first we're going to create migrations, okay? And before we actually create our own migrations, we're going to run a couple custom ones that come out of the box with Laravel. So what you're going to do is you're going to do PHP artisan, and the artisan is the command line tool that comes with Laravel. So you're gonna do, first of all, migrate, which is going to migrate the authentication tables and the migration tables into your database that comes out of the box. And then you're going to do make auth, and those two steps are going to do everything that you need to get the authentication system set up. And then you're ready to make your own migrations. And for this, obviously we're going to need projects model and a to-do model. It already comes with a user model. So you're going to do PHP artisan make migration, and then the name of your migration. In this case, you don't have to add the timestamp stuff, but in this case, we're going to say create projects table and then create to-dos table. You don't have to add the extension either. So you just type that name in there. And then what it's going to do, it's going to give you these migration files, and then you fill it out with your own information. Okay, so the up function runs when you run php artisan migrate. If you roll back a migration, the down one runs. So basically, when you run php artisan migrate, it's going to create a table called projects in this case, and these are the fields it's going to put in that table. This is going to create an auto incrementing ID field. You're going to have a title and a description for a project. You're going to have an unsigned integer. This is going to be basically the foreign key that points to basically your user table, right? Because a user owns a project. And then the timestamps thing, this is going to generate automatically. It's going to created at and updated at fields in your database. Okay, so it's going to be a similar story with the to-dos migration. You're going to do something like this. Okay, so you're going to have a user ID. Not only does a to-do belong to a user, but also a to-do belongs to a particular project. So you can see that there. Medium text is going to create like a varchar field or something like that. In this case, you're going to have a completed status, right? It's going to create a Boolean field, which is actually like a tiny int, and then it's going to default to false. Okay, so that's what you're going to do there. Then you're going to do php artisan migrate. And then you're ready to get started on your models. So the first model is going to be the user model. So to make a model, you can just go php artisan, make model, and then the name. So in this case, user. I'm sorry, not user. User comes automatically. But you're going to create a project and then a to-do one. So this is the user model. You're going to have, some of this is going to come automatically, right? The two things that you're going to add are down here. So you're going to say public function projects, because this is a class, this model user, and then you're going to say return this has many app project. Okay, and then in your project one, forget about this up here for now, you're going to say public function user, and it's going to do the same thing except belongs to, right? Because this is going to specify that there's a one-to-many relationship, one user to many projects. Okay, one user to many to-dos. Okay, newer versions of Laravel have something called has many through, where you could do it that way, but this is probably the simplest way for you to understand it now. And the whole point of these two methods is Laravel will automatically look for if you have a user record that you have stored in a variable and you're doing stuff with it, you need to get the projects where the user ID field of that project is this user record's ID, if you understand what I'm saying. Then you just use this, and Laravel will automatically grab the projects that belong to that user. Same with the to-dos, okay? So this is just kind of helping you avoiding repeat yourself in your controller files. Now this stuff up here in the user model comes automatically, so you can just skip that. But the project and to-dos, you're going to have this protected fillable field. And this protected fillable thing, this is a whitelist of all the fields that you want to let yourself manually fill in your controller file. It's a security thing. There are other ways to do it, but I'm telling you to do it this way because this is the safest, right? So, for example, you're not going to put ID in here because ID is auto-incrementing, all right? So that's it for the model files. I'll show you the routing file. Some of this is going to come automatically with the scaffolding that we did, like the auth routes and the welcome thing. Same with this one. But the project and to-dos routes you're going to do automatically. So you're going to do route. This double colon is indicating a static method from the route the route thing. So you can use get, you can use post, you can use patch and delete. These are all the type of request, right, sent from the browser. This, and then in this function, this first thing, that's the URL. Okay, so if you've done routing before in other frameworks, you kind of understand how that works. This curly bracket syntax indicates a route, URL parameter, basically. In this case, an ID. It doesn't have to say ID; it could say anything. Then this is going to be the controller and then the method on the controller that you're routing this request to. And then after here we have middleware auth, which just indicates this comes out of the box, but you just specify it right here. That indicates that all requests that come through that URL have to be authenticated, right? So that's it for routing. Now we'll look at some of the controller files. To create a controller file, you just do, you guessed it, controller, and then you'll just say projects controller. Okay? Same with to-dos. Alright, so projects controller, we're going to go, if you saw in the routing file, you have 7 methods: index, create, store, show, edit, update, and destroy. Okay? Index, and it even automatically gives you, and you know what, when you do that, you can say PHP art, if you want some of this to be written for you, you do PHP artisan make controller, or actually what you can do is you can do help make controller, and it will show you a bunch of the options, but basically you can do this -r thing, okay, and it generates a resource class, so it generates these comments and the actual function names. But anyways, so index, you're going to want to list the projects, right? You already took care of the fact that the person in this request is going to be authenticated, so you're going to create a variable projects, and then you're going to say project, okay, and you have to bring it, you have to namespace the stuff that the models that you're going to be working in up here. That's how you do that. So and that's so that you can do things like this and say project : where, and it's going to query the database, and it's going to look at all the in the project table. It's going to grab them where the user ID is field is equal to. You're going to do this business, which these are like helper methods. So auth, and then you're going to chain user, you're going to chain ID, and that's going to grab the ID of the logged in user, and it's going to compare it to the user ID field in the projects table. And it's going to get all those records, okay, and store them in this projects variable. Then you're going to return a view, and we'll get to the views later, but basically the views live down here in this resources views area, right? So projects.index, so it's going to go into the projects folder, and then the index.blade.php view, and you're going to send along by way of with that projects, that projects variable that we just got, okay? Create, you already know they're authenticated, that's about all you need to know, so you're just going to return a view called projects.create, all right? Store, you got to do a little bit more validation. So, you know, here we actually have something coming in from the, it's from a post request if you look at the routing file. And you're going to do this request, okay? Then you're going to validate it, so you can go request validate. And then you have this, you know, array basically in the function, and these are the fields in the request: title and description. You're saying, you know, they're required, and the max length, right? You can look on the Laravel documentation. There's a ton of different types of validation you can do here. So then we're going to create a new project model or record, right? And assign it to this variable. Then we're going to set the fields of that project: title, description, to what was sent in the request. And then user ID, we do some things that you should remember from not that long ago: auth, user ID, and it's going to store the ID of the logged in user in that field. And you're going to save, boom, it's in the database. Then here we're going to basically redirect to the, if you look at the routing file, this is basically creating a route to that particular project's show page, right? So you're grabbing the ID of this project that you just saved to the database and appending it to the end of this project's /, and that's going to basically, through the routing file, get sent to, when you do this redirect route, it's going to get sent to the show method of this controller, basically. This is the show method of the controller. Here you're getting ID. This is from the parameter that was sent in the URL, in the routing file. And here you're going to say project, and you're going to try and find that project. You're going to say project, find or fail ID. If the ID that they put in the URL doesn't exist, then it's going to fail. And then we're going to say abort unless, okay? In this function, you put this in there, all right? So the first part, 2 parameters basically to this function. The first section is true or something that evaluates to true or false. In this case, project, this project that we found, because because we made it to this line, it didn't fail. The user ID field on that project equals authenticated user's ID. Is that if that's true, then it's not going to abort. But if it's not true, then it's going to abort with a 403 error. Okay, so the user doesn't get to do this stuff, which is you're returning the project to the show view. Okay. This, you know what? The only thing that I've changed here with the edit over the, some of these other ones, this should all look familiar to you from what I've just showed you, except for instead of using with, we're using this compact syntax. Okay, this is from vanilla PHP. Update, this is pretty similar, except before we validate the request, we're just going to see if the project a word on this, Laravel supports, if you're doing a post request, you can pass values and parameters in the post request body, like from a form, and then you can also pass URL parameters. I don't like doing that. Okay, everything should go in the request body. Okay, so all you have to do is do this, and then we're telling ourselves there should be an ID field that was passed in from the request, and we're going to find the project based on that. Okay, and then we're going to make sure that basically the project that we found, the authenticated user owns it. We're going to validate that stuff like we did before, and then the project that we found, we're just going to specify the field of that project record, and then we're going to set it to the request fields. Okay, and we're going to save it, and then we're doing the rerouting basically to the show project thing. This is destroy. Okay, we're going to find the project, make sure the person who's trying to access this functionality owns that project. We're also going to get the to-dos that belong to that project, and here's where the methods that we created in the model files come in useful, right? Because we already found the project. Now we don't have to do anything very complicated to find the to-dos that belong to that project, because we can just say project to-dos get, and it's just going to get all of the to-dos that belong to that project specifically. So then we're going to say for to-dos as to-do, and then if that to-do exists, just go ahead and delete it from the database. And then we're going to delete the project, and then we're going to redirect to the index of projects. Okay, now the to-dos controller, I've given you all the tools you need to understand this, right? I've given you all the tools you need to understand. I'm not going to go line by line, but I've given you pretty much all the tools you need to figure this out. So I've given you a sneak peek here, but you can find in the description of this video on GitHub, you can find all the code to this, so you can go ahead and explore this on your own. All right, so this, I'm going to show you a little bit. Now we're on to the views part, and this is the end of it. Sorry, I know this is a little wordy, but really excited about this technology. So this is the layout view. So basically, a lot of this stuff is scaffolded automatically. All I did was I changed up, some of this. I changed up some of the navigation stuff that comes automatically. But other than that, the only thing you really need to pay attention to in this file is this @yield content. Because when you're routing something to a view, @yield content, it's going to put in there on that layout page whatever is in this section. Okay, you're specifying, this view that you're calling from your controller file, it extends that app layout file that I was just showing you, and then in wherever it says @yield, it's going to put whatever between this @section, okay? @section, @end section, @if, @end if, that's all Blade syntax. You can read more about it on the Laravel website, but basically it's just a more friendly way of doing stuff in your view files rather than writing in PHP. You can write in PHP in here, which is cool with with Laravel if you prefer to do vanilla PHP, but Blade syntax is really simple. So as an example, this is actually a bad example. We don't need to do this. This is the index of projects page. All right. So, and you can see we just did some basic Bootstrap stuff here, but basically this is the listing of projects. So we're saying @if count projects. So the projects that we sent, we're saying if this count thing, basically it's going to count the projects that you put in here, and if it's a 0, if there's 0 projects, it's going to evaluate to false. Okay. and otherwise it's going to be true. So then basically if it evaluates the false, then we're down here and it's going to say, sorry, no projects yet. Okay, so you see at if, at else, at end if. Okay, and then if there are projects, we're going to create a list basically, and then you say at for each, at end for each, and then at for each projects as project. Okay, and then you should know how for each works. This is, and this is the part that you should pay attention to, I guess, with Blade. This double bracket syntax, this is how you infuse this template with the dynamic content that you pulled from the database, in this case, the project. So here we're putting the project title, project description. The double brackets indicate that it's automatically going to put whatever you're putting out here, it's going to run it through that HTML special chars variable that comes with PHP to basically escape all of the HTML, right? So instead of actually putting, if a user entered HTML, instead of putting out the HTML with the actual, caret, it's going to put, whatever the HTML code for that is. Anyway, let me show you something a little bit more exciting. I'll show you the create. So this is an example of a form with Laravel. There's more helpers than what I'm showing you, if that's your thing, but this is how I do it, and it's pretty convenient. So you'll say form action, this is the URL that you're targeting in your routing file. Method for creation is post. You have to do @CSRF. That's all it is 5 characters. You don't even need to know more than that. You just have to do it with every form. It protects free security out of the box, and Laravel won't even let you use forms unless you put it on there. So I highly suggest you put it on there. And then this is just form stuff. This is client-side validation. We're just saying required. And that's about it for this form. The editing form is a little bit more complicated. Okay. Because here we have this @method thing, right? So because most browsers can't do an actual patch request, most browsers are limited to get and post. You can do a post request, but by doing this @method patch thing, it's going to spoof a patch request. So then the routing file is going to see this and go, oh, it's not actually a post request. Let's route it as if it's a patch request. All right, and then here we see we're putting in dynamic content into this, right? Because we're editing something, so we have already sent from our controller file the project information to this form or this view. So you can put like the project ID in this hidden field here, and you can use the double bracket syntax inside of these quotation marks inside of the HTML. Here we're putting the the title as the value for this one, and so on and so forth. All right, I've given you all the tools you need to try and understand this. So I hope that you try, and you can fork this on GitHub or download or clone it or whatever, and play around with it. Sorry, I know this is probably a little long, but I just wanted to show you how awesome Laravel is, and I hope you decide to make something awesome with it. Have a good one.